Now, the rest of the story. Would Andrew Jackson or William Henry Harrison or Abraham Lincoln ever have been elected to the United States presidency without evoking the popular campaign symbol of the log cabin? Bill Harrison actually was born on his family's fabulous Virginia plantation. His daddy was a wealthy, politically prominent man, but the image that appealed to the voters who voted for him was summed up in the slogan, log cabin and hard cider. The log cabin is the all-American house. To the schoolchild, it still represents our grassroots origins, our pioneer virtues. Its appearance was as rugged and its resistance to the elements as hardy as the American spirit itself. Perhaps more significant, a properly constructed log cabin would last for generations, a dwelling of humble origin and yet as enduring as the American dream. Usually only 2 metal tools were required to build a log cabin, an axe, of course, to fell the trees and hew the logs, and a wedge-shaped cleaving tool called a froe for shingles and roof boards. Often a frontier cabin contained not one piece of iron, no iron hinges, nor even a single iron nail. Sometimes the pioneers built temporary log cabins in which even the chimneys were made of logs and clay. Sometimes the crevices between the logs were filled with moss. This was merely to insulate. The logs themselves were securely attached by corner notches. At Thanksgiving time, myriad mental pictures arise from the Pilgrim heritage we learned in school: wild turkeys and Indian corn and black hats and buckles and bell-muzzle blunderbuss muskets and hazy harvest moons and cozy log cabins. But this is the rest of the story. After exploring the North American coastline for more than a month, our Pilgrim fathers parked the Mayflower in Plymouth Bay, went searching for a site for their settlement. It was Christmas, 1620. The Pilgrims' first permanent dwelling and utility house was constructed immediately. It was 20 feet square. 2 weeks later, it burned, and the resident Pilgrim shore party scurried back to the Mayflower, spent the remainder of the winter aboard. At the first sign of spring, they were ashore again, tilling fields, building cabins. Fortunately, they'd brought with them a wide variety of tools, broadaxes and pitching axes and chisels and augers and so forth. Before the Mayflower returned to England that April, several small cabins were standing. It was Governor William Bradford who called them cabins, but they were not log cabins. Nor was the larger structure they had erected before New Year's, nor were the buildings at Jamestown Colony in Virginia a dozen years before, nor were the shelters of the Puritan colonists, who would not arrive for almost a decade. They did not live in cabins, not log cabins. The men we now recognize as our founding fathers from Jamestown on built everything from frame houses to thatched huts to tents, but they built no log cabins. 2 centuries later, this young nation would glorify the log cabin as the all-American house, the symbol of our earliest heritage. And yet the first one appeared on the North American landscape in 1638 in a colony in the lower Delaware Valley. Those colonists built log cabins because their forefathers had built them thousands of years before. But they were not Jamestown Virginians. They were not Pilgrims who built log cabins. They were not Puritans who built log cabins. No, those who eventually taught the English to build log cabins were Swedish. Now you know the rest of the story.